The message appeared in both their minds at once.
I'm going to kill you.
But that was just the beginning of a nightmare that would claim the life of a loyal dog, destroy a marriage, and drive one man to drink himself to death. Welcome to the In-Between. I'm Carol Ann, and tonight's story proves that sometimes the real horror isn't in surviving a dogman encounter. It's in living with the memory. Not every kid is born with a silver iPhone in their hand, including Joyce Stone. The third of three children, she was born in the late 50s to a southeast Kansas farmer and his wife who barely have enough money to feed the two boys they already have. Joyce's dad has no problem making it known throughout Joyce's childhood that she was supposed to be a boy. At least a boy can pull his weight with chores around the farm to help out. So Joyce, like any other little girl in her shoes who just wants the approval of her father, starts going by the name Joe. Joyce is way too girly and does everything she can to grow into the toughest, bravest tomboy that a girl can be. She works hard to be able to do anything her brothers can do. But her brothers are just like anybody else's older brothers, even mine, who love nothing more than to freak her out any chance they get. If she flinches, she is treated to rounds of, "You're such a girl." That's the worst. You can be scared, but you can't show it. So Joe makes it her mission to never show fear. Well, as the years roll on, we get to the spring of 1975. Joe has grown into one tough teenager. But the farm is still not doing very well. So at age 17, she drops out of school, gets her GED to help on the farm. But what she really wants to do, her lifelong ambition, is to be a nurse. She applies to nursing school, and even though she's a year too young, her tough-as-nails attitude convinces the school administrators to let her give it a shot. Nursing school is tougher than she thought it was going to be. There's so much to learn. But Joe, being the tenacious young woman that she is, just puts on her big girl pants and works as hard as she can. Now, Joe has herself a boyfriend, Dale, who's about 18 and starting out his life well enough that he has his own house on the other side of town already. So they fall into a routine. Joe goes to school during the day, spends evenings with Dale, comes home around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, sleeps for a couple of hours, and then gets up at 3 a.m. to study for school later in the morning. Sounds like a rough schedule to me, but she's getting a 4.0, so okay. Joe's family farm is a full 5 miles from town in the middle of nowhere, woods all around. So at night, it's especially dark with only a little yellow bug light bulb on the porch to show her the way. On the night of May 6th, as she's making her way through the dark onto the dim yellow light of the porch, she hears something rustling around in the brush and trees. Whatever it is, it's a few feet up off the ground and about 30 feet away. She stops and looks over there thinking, what is that? Whatever it is, it sounds big. She walks over to that side of the porch and looks out into the trees and shrubs to see if she can figure out what it is. But it's quiet. In fact, everything is quiet. So she thinks, well, maybe it's a buck with its horns caught in the branches or something. Weird, but not out of the realm of possibility. But whatever it is, Joe claps her hands and yells, "Get out of here!" to try to scare it away. Maybe the loud yelling will startle it and it can free itself. But instead of something running away, she hears this sound and thinks, that's not like any deer I know, or any animal for that matter. But things sound strange in the dark, so she just kind of says whatever and goes in the house. 2 nights later, Joe wakes up to rumbling thunder and branches scraping on the metal roof. Yes! Joe loves storms, so she just lies back in her bed, watching the flashing lightning through her tall bedroom windows, knowing she doesn't have school in the morning, so she can watch all night. Her room at the back of the house has two really big tall windows, one on the left by her bed and one on the right across the room from the door to the hallway. She fluffs her pillow, puts her head back down, and gets ready for the show. Lightning flashes, and she notices something blocking the light of the window by her bed. She sits up, starts to get out of bed when there's another light flash, and she sees that she's right. The lightning only shows through about the top third of the window. But that doesn't make any sense. The house is up on cinder blocks, so something standing that tall in front of the window would have to be 8 to 9 feet tall. But whatever, it's gotta be her brother. He must be standing on something, and the funky light is just making him look bigger. She starts walking toward the window with a plan to throw her sheer curtains back and ruin her brother's prank. Lightning flashes again, and she thinks, that can't be my brother. Well, maybe it's the shed in the backyard throwing a shadow. That's gotta be it. She turns and heads down the hallway to use the bathroom. As she's coming back, lightning flashes again and stops her in her tracks. The shadow blocking the light has moved to the window on the right, and she's standing there trying to wrap her head around how the shadow from the shed could move to the other window. So she goes over to the window by her bed with the idea that she can kind of look over to the right and see exactly what is blocking the light. And as she gets close to the window, the shadow glides back over to the left. Okay, that's not her brother. He is incapable of gliding. And as much as she hates the feeling, she's starting to get scared. She creeps a little closer. Her knees are shaking a bit, but she knows in her head she's safe. The curtains are only shears, but they're white shears. So when the lightning flashes, it's going to bounce off the white, and whatever's outside can't see her inside her dark room, right? When she gets to about 1.5 feet away, she steels herself to push the curtains aside and find out what is going on out there. Another flash, and Joe watches the shadow shorten until it's even with her height. What? Now she is full on scared, like it or not, but she can't move. She is nailed to that spot, looking out the window, waiting for the next flash, hoping she can figure out what is out there. She hears a little bang on the window and the sound of sniffing, like an animal trying to catch a scent. And it dawns on her that whatever this thing is, maybe it's the same thing she tried to chase out of the yard the other night. Maybe she made it mad. The storm is getting closer, so the flashes are faster. The next flash, Joe sees this thing's right arm reach up toward the top of the window, and her heart stops. She sees through the shears not the paw of an animal, but a hand, 5 separate fingers, each one with a 2 or 3 inch claw at the end. Now her knees are really starting to shake. She hears what sounds like scratching at the trim of her window. Is this thing trying to get in? She wants to run, but she is frozen in fear. She doesn't know what to do. She just can't think. A full-on lightning strike hits a dead tree not far from the house, taking off a big branch. A series of lightning strikes turns night into day, long enough for Joe to see the profile of this creature as it turns its head to check out what's going on with the tree. What she sees changes her life forever. It has a wide head like a wolf, but massive. It has ears on it like a German Shepherd or like a Doberman, maybe 4 or 5 inches long with tufts of hair at the end. This nose on this thing is way longer than anything she'd ever seen on a dog or in pictures of wolves. She sees bright white teeth that are about 3 inches long, with canines that are even longer. Its fur is all black, and from what she can see, this thing is jacked. Joe's body finally catches up with her head, and she takes off running into the living room, jumps on the couch, and covers her head. Her whole body is shaking. Her head goes into overdrive, trying to figure out what to do. Should she tell her family what she saw? If she does, they're never going to believe her, and they're going to mock her relentlessly. Okay, that option's out. Instead, she just says, well, okay. I have no idea what I just saw, but I'm certainly not going out at night anymore. Finals are coming up. I'll just stay home and put all my energy into studying. By the next morning, Joe's trying to convince herself that she didn't really see what she knows she saw. As she leaves for school, she casually goes around the house to the back to check out the tree that was struck by lightning. The tree branch is right there on the ground. Okay, that happened. So she looks up at the trim around her bedroom window and sees fresh gouges in the wood and flecks of black trim paint on the ground and thinks it wasn't a dream. That really happened. So now Joe's afraid to be in her room. She just has this feeling that she's somehow made this thing mad. So, new plan. From that point on, she takes naps in her room in the afternoon while it's still light out. Then she takes out her clothes for the next day, hangs them on her bedroom doorknob, and sleeps for a few more hours on the living room couch until her alarm goes off at 3 a.m. when it's time to wake up, turn on the lamp, and start studying for school. Problem is, the lamp shines right into her parents' room. So her dad says, "Nuh-uh, I can't sleep. You're going to have to take your studying back into your room." Well, that's not going to happen. So Joe has a new idea. She'll study in the kitchen. Seems like a solid option. When you walk into the kitchen, it has windows on two side walls that have white curtains on the bottom half, and then a door to the outside on the far wall. So she sets up a little reading lamp on the table so she doesn't have to use the big fluorescent overhead lights that late at night. And she figures out that she actually really likes it there. As she's studying, she can look up at those white window curtains and use them as kind of a mental whiteboard to figure out whatever problem she has in her head. Just a couple nights into this new routine, so May 10th, just 4 nights after the thunderstorm, she's in the kitchen at 3 a.m. studying when she feels a sensation that is totally new for her. She feels the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Joe has no idea how she knows this, but she knows in that instant that this thing is back and it's watching her through the windows behind her. Remember, with the house foundation being up a bit and with the curtains covering the bottom half of the windows, this thing has to be 8 to 9 feet tall. It starts to growl, the deepest, biggest canine-sounding growl Joe has ever heard. She can feel it just as much as she can hear it, and it freezes her solid, head down, looking at her books and pencil frozen on the page. As the monster continues to growl, she can hear it move around the outside of the house, past the door to the backyard, and back up the other side until it is right in front of her. She keeps her eyes on the page in front of her, too afraid to look up at the window, when a thought pops into her head. If you look it in the eyes, it will come into you. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean it's going to possess her? Or it's just going to tear through the glass and physically come in and get her? Joe doesn't know, but she doesn't plan on finding out. She's had enough experience with animals to know that a lot of times, if you look it in the eyes, it's a challenge, and she has no intention of challenging this thing. But her head starts drifting up, like it's following orders from somebody else. And she thinks, no, not going to look at it. Don't look at it. She tries closing her eyes, but her eyelids won't even move. And then she sees it. She sees these neonish yellow-green lights hovering 6 or 7 inches apart, and she thinks, well, that's ridiculous. Something way too tall would have to be out there with a little lantern or something to make that kind of eye shine. But again, Her body finally catches up with her brain, and she stands up so fast that her chair goes sliding across the floor behind her, smacking into the fridge. The bang is like a starting gun, and she takes off running to her parents' room, barges right in on her sleeping parents, and dives onto their bed, landing right between them. She just about gives them a heart attack, but she is terrified, and she doesn't care who knows it. Her mom reaches over to turn on her light and says, "What is going on?" But the only thing Joe can manage to eke out is something about a monster outside. Her mom, thinking this has to be some kind of stupid joke, says, "Do you want me to go outside and make that big bad monster go away?" Joe starts crying hysterically, and it finally hits her mom that whatever's going on is actually serious. Joe's dad turns over, looks at Joe, who's shaking uncontrollably, and says, "Are you afraid?" Hoping he would get her standard response of, "I'm not afraid of anything." But that is not the response he gets. Instead, Joe looks up at her dad, the last person in the world she wants to show fear to, and just nods her head yes. Her dad puts his hand on her arms and says, "It's okay. You just fell asleep while you were studying and had a nightmare." And Joe so wants him to be right. She nods her head yes, and actually chooses to believe him, because the having a nightmare scenario is a way better option than the thought of this monster coming back and finding her again. So she goes back out onto the couch. She's not going to be sleeping tonight, so she throws a blanket over her head with a lamp underneath so she doesn't bother her dad, and tries to study. Her dad comes out and sees what she's doing and says, "Don't be ridiculous. Just go back in the kitchen and study." Not a single fiber of her being wants to do that, but she does. And nothing else happens that night, or for the next couple of nights. She's finally starting to relax a little bit and get back in the groove of actually getting some real studying done, which is kind of important because she has finals coming up in just a couple of days. But the third night, it happens again. Hair standing up on the back of her neck. She thinks, no, no, no. She braces herself for the growl to come from the window behind her. Joe's head starts again, involuntarily moving to look at this thing at the window, which is already standing in front of her. This time, Joe can see the whole head move, and she realizes just its head takes up most of the width of the whole window. Looks like a werewolf. She takes off out of the kitchen into the living room, diving onto the couch, and covers her head. The next day, Joe tries to figure out what to do. She can't keep doing this. She can't get any studying done, and finals are tomorrow. So she calls her boyfriend Dale and says, "Can I come over to your place and study tonight?" Dale, who hasn't seen or heard from Joe in a few days, asks her, "Are you breaking up with me?" Joe says no, but I'll explain later. So that evening, the two go out for dinner, and Joe musters up the courage to tell Dale, "I'm being stalked by a werewolf." Dale starts to laugh, and Joe starts to cry. This is the one person she thought she could tell that might actually believe her. Dale sees the tears well up in Joe's eyes and fall down her face and realizes she's serious. What is going on? This is not the tough as nails girl I know. So he says, "You know what? I'm sorry. Let's go get your stuff, get your books, get your clothes. You can spend the night. I'll stay up and stand guard while you study. And you know King won't let anything get by him." King is Dale's huge pit bull, who still won't allow Joe into the house without a full inspection, even though she and Dale have been seeing each other for like 6 months already. There is nothing that dog would not do for Dale. So they head over to his place and park themselves on the living room floor, Joe with her books spread out all over, and Dale watching TV or whatever to pass the time. Time rolls on, and it's almost 4 a.m. Joe's feeling pretty good. Nothing's happening and she's getting some good work done. Dale says, "You want something to drink?" And Joe says, "Sure." Dale gets up and walks over to the fridge. Now, the living room and the kitchen areas are pretty much just one big room. Dale doesn't even need to turn on a light because the light from the living room is more than enough. After a few minutes, Joe realizes that he hasn't come back. She looks up into the kitchen and sees Dale still leaning over, looking into the fridge, when she hears him speak in this high-pitched, strangulated tone that she has never heard from him before.
"Come here, now."
Joe walks into the kitchen and bends down to look into the fridge to see what the problem is. And she sees that everything inside the fridge is shaking because Dale is shaking. Then they both hear this crying, whimpering coming from outside. "Is that King?" Dale says, "It can't be King. He doesn't cry like that." That's when the hair on the back of Joe's neck starts to stand up. And she thinks this cannot be happening. She's miles from her house. How could this thing track her so far? But then comes the growl. Joe freaks out. "Oh my God, it followed me!" Dale grabs Joe by the wrist and starts dragging her out of the kitchen. And keep in mind that Joe weighs 110 at best, and Dale's like 6'2" and weighs about 210. So if he's taking her somewhere, she's going, like it or not. So he starts dragging her out of the kitchen, but stops on a dime, staring out the window. Joe looks out the window and sees the two huge yellowish green eyes staring right back at him, brighter than she has ever seen them before. She looks back at Dale, and he looks like he's totally zoned out, almost like he's in a trance. She looks back out the window, and she can see that this thing has what looks like a thick lion's mane of jet black hair surrounding its head. She can see those massive white teeth again, and a tongue that's black, and it's drooling. She doesn't know if it's drooling because its mouth is open or because it's anticipating its next meal, but she knows she doesn't want to find out. Joe watches the creature's eyes move from Dale's eyes down to the grip that Dale has on Joe's arm as its lips curl back in a snarl. And Joe and Dale hear at the same time a message delivered in their heads.
"I'm going to kill you."
Dale takes off with Joe in tow out of the kitchen, through the living room, past his bedroom, and into the bathroom. No windows. Very smart. However, just like Joe's house, the bathroom is on the same wall as the kitchen. So on the outside, this thing only has to shuffle over about 8 feet to be right on the other side of the wall from them. So there they are in the bathroom, Dale holding Joe so tight she can't breathe. He says, "I am so sorry. I thought it was just the stress getting to you. But this thing is real." Joe says, "I think it's hunting me." And they both just stand there, having no idea what to do next. Joe feels the hair on her neck stand up again, and from right on the other side of the wall from where they are standing, how does it know that? Comes this roar 10 times bigger and deeper and more vicious than ever before. Both of them can feel the sound reverberating in their chests and can even see the bottles and stuff on the shower shelf moving. Joe shouts, "Go away!" when they hear something else crying. "King! He's still out there with that thing!" Dale yells, "King!" They hear King's whining change to vicious growls and the snarls of an attack. The fight is on. Sadly, it doesn't take long before neither of them can hear King anymore. Dale is freaking. Tears are streaming down his face. But now that King is no longer a threat, the creature is really mad. It starts banging and scratching at the outside wall of the house, right where Joe and Dale are still standing. They hear the siding cracking and being ripped off as this thing is tunneling through the wall, roaring in anger the whole time. Unbeknownst to them, the neighbor, whose house is less than 100 feet away, hears King screaming and thinks it's Joe. So he calls the cops and says, "You guys better get over here right now because I think my neighbor is killing his girlfriend." Joe and Dale hear sirens coming, and Joe prays that it is enough to scare this thing off because it is coming for them, and they are frozen in fear and have nowhere to go. Fish in a barrel. But as the sirens get closer, everything else goes quiet. Maybe it's gone, but neither of them makes a move to go find out. They hear a loud bang, 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 bang on the door, followed by a voice yelling, "Open the door or we're gonna kick it in." Oh, thank God. Dale leads Joe out of the bathroom to the front door and opens it for the police, hurries them inside, and quickly shuts the door behind them. The cops take a look at Dale and Joe and look all around the living room. Have you guys been partying just a little too hard tonight? Dale points to Joe's books all over the floor and says, "No, sir. She is studying for her finals." Another officer who had gone around the back of the house comes in and says, "You gotta come and see this." So everyone troops outside and around to the back of the house, and Dale falls to his knees. Joe follows his eyes and sees what he sees. King. And let's just say it is obvious to anyone around that this dog fought for his master to the very end. The police then look at the back of the house. There is a 3-foot by 3-foot hole torn through the siding, insulation everywhere, all the way down to the sheetrock on the inside. The cops just look at each other. Anyone have any good ideas where to even start writing this one up? Nope. One cop looks at Dale and says, "Do you want to report this?" Dale says, "I wouldn't know what to report." The cop says, "Neither do I. I'm willing to let this go if you are." Dale says, "I'm good with that." And with that, they left. Dale and Joe go back in and quickly grab some stuff, jump in Dale's car, and leave. They really don't have anywhere else to go, so Dale just drives the 18 miles to Joe's school where they wait in the car until it's time for Joe to go take her finals. Dale just sits in the parking lot waiting for her to get done. Joe doesn't even remember taking the tests. Some other part of her brain totally takes over. When she's done, she goes back to the car, and Dale is just sitting there in a daze. They start going back and forth with Dale being sorry he didn't believe her, and Joe being sorry about King and that she should never have come over, and Dale saying it's not your fault. But I don't think we can see each other anymore. The two don't speak for 3 or 4 weeks, but Dale eventually reaches out and says he wants to see Joe again. But they make an honest-to-God pinky swear to never tell another soul what happened and do their best to just move forward with life. They date for a while, get married, move away from Kansas, and have a daughter. But the memories are just too much. They are divorced before their little girl's first birthday. And Dale's life starts a downward spiral of drugs and alcohol. And as much as it breaks Joe's heart, they keep their promise to never talk about it. Fast forward 30 years, and Dale is on his deathbed. Cirrhosis of the liver from all those years of using alcohol as a numbing agent. Joe goes to see him, and Dale tells her, "I was wrong. We should have told people. The only way I could get past the picture in my head of those green eyes drilling into my soul and get any sleep at night was to get messed up and pass out first. Don't end up like me. You need to start talking to people." So, Joe makes Dale a promise to start telling their story, and that's exactly what she's doing. Some interesting tidbits of information regarding this story. Joe actually moves back to Kansas not long after their daughter was born. And though she's never actually seen this monster again, she still feels her neck hair detection system go off occasionally to this day. Not long after the attack at Dale's house, Dale had to go see an ophthalmologist because his eyesight just tanked. The ophthalmologist says it looks like he experienced some kind of burn on the retina of both eyes, and Dale has to wear super thick glasses from that point on. It isn't until about 4 years ago Joe stumbles across information about something called a Dogman, and she thinks, that's it. That's what we saw. And for whatever reason, just being able to put a name to the beast that haunts her makes the whole ordeal just a little easier to cope with. It's a real thing. It's not just her going crazy. Hearing about others with experiences similar to hers has helped, but the one thing Joe has always wanted to do, but just couldn't bring herself to do it out of guilt, is get a dog of her own. After all, in her mind, she's the reason that King died that night. Why should she have the pleasure of having one of her own? But I'm happy to report that in just the last few months, after 40 years of being a nurse and helping others when they are at their worst, Joe has gotten a dog of her very own named Victor, who has no idea he's actually a dog. And I think Joe likes it that way. Little bit intense? Holy buckets! I don't even understand how you slip back into normal life after something like that. If you'd like to hear Joe tell her story in her own words, you can head over to either Matt Emch's channel at Planet 412 or Vic Condiff's channel at Dogman Encounters. Links to both of those interviews will be included in the description. If you are a Dogman fan and need another heart-racing fix, click right here. It'll stop the jonesing, I promise. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.